same-sex marriage. Now you're for it. You defended President Obama's immigration policies. Now you say they're too harsh. You supported his trade deal dozens of times. You even called it the gold standard. Now, suddenly, last week, you're against it. Will you say anything to get elected?
Well, actually, I have been very consistent over the course of my entire life. I have always fought for the same values and principles.
This is the kind of thing you just hate to hear about. It just makes you angry. It's one of those posts that just really, I mean, it's a motivator, that's for sure. So David Filippo posts, he says, Barnes & Noble booksellers will kick off Hillary Clinton's What Happened? Who to Blame Next in New York City on September 12th. Today. Great. I find Barnes & Noble pathetically biased in spreading Clinton rhetoric. Some friends and I, on a recent trip to Barnes & Noble's store in Exton, Pennsylvania, stopped in to purchase Bernie Sanders' book, Bernie Sanders' Guide to the Political Revolution, but could not find the book on the bestsellers table. He says it's the #1 bestseller on Amazon. Or on the new release table, released August 29th. After an exhausting search, and with the help of a Barnes & Noble personnel, the book was finally found on the second floor, back right corner of the store on a lower shelf. When Hillary's book will be released, expect to see hundreds of copies of What Happened prominently displayed when you enter any Barnes & Noble store. Quite obviously Barnes & Noble, a store that one would expect impartiality to viewpoint and intellectual thought, will be catering to the ranting rhetoric of a delusional, pathetic, whining corporate elitists. I mean, we don't need any more proof, right, that the system is stacked against us. But something like this just really drives a nail into the coffin, right? I mean, it's just like, it just really, really burns me up that all the businesses out there, and I don't care whether it's on purpose or whether it's, I mean, I just care that it's happening. It's like the whole thing is tilted against us. It makes you feel like you're just spinning your wheels, wasting your time. And I'm sure, I don't think in this case that this post is designed to make you feel that way. I think it can't help but make you feel that way. As far as that goes, let me just say, we wouldn't even be talking about socialism or helping the poor or any of that if Hillary Clinton was president right now. Okay? They would completely keep our minds off of the left side, which is the real Democratic Party. I mean, the Democratic Party is what's left of everything good, and everything about us being one country, one people, and one country helping each other all experience the American dream. And I want to remind you what the American dream was when they came up with the name American Dream. It was exclusively a dream for a white man to be able to get a job that would enable him, not black people, only a few black people maybe. Even back then in the 50s, there really was no extending that hand to minorities of any kind. But a white man, so that he could have a family, maybe 3 or 4 kids, maybe 8 or 12. The richer you are, people like the Kennedys had 12 kids, or one, and that was the American dream. That's what the name came up, how the name came up, that's what they were talking about. It was never, you think this country is racist now? It was never extended to any minority, and it certainly wasn't extended to anybody coming over on a boat or immigrants, okay? But certainly not illegal immigrants. I mean, I just want to make sure you understand, in 1865, we beat the slavers down south, but we didn't end slavery in this country, not by any means. And everything you see now is what it's turned into. Okay, in 1865, they immediately started working on a new version of slavery, the capitalist system. The capitalist system was barely developed back then. It was just people opening up stores and getting goods and trading and all that kind of stuff. But very quickly after they lost their slavery system, they went to work on how they could create a system without the people even realizing it, to enslave the people. And by enslave the people, I mean make them work cheap to do everything that they want. They even, I don't know if they do it on purpose, but they create the desperation that creates prostitution and drugs. Well, guess what? I've known a lot of rich people, and not very many of them didn't do drugs or didn't have a prostitute or take advantage of poor people in that way, or poorer people. So this, doing things like this, it's like built into this system. This system takes everything that doesn't back the slavery, the economic slavery system, the capitalist system, and puts it on a back shelf. Oh, God. What a beautiful store they have in Lexington, too.
Do you think New York State should recognize gay marriage?
No.
No. Okay.
I believe that marriage is not just a bond, but a sacred bond between a man and a woman.
I have not supported same-sex marriage. I have supported civil partnerships and contractual relationships.
I support marriage for lesbian and gay couples. I support it personally and as a matter of policy and law.
So you're saying your opinion on gay marriage changed, or you changed your mind?
I have to say, I think you are being very persistent, but you are playing with my words and playing with what is such an
I'm just trying to clarify
issue.
so I can understand.
No, I don't think you are trying to clarify. I think you're trying to say that, I used to be opposed and now I'm in favor and I did it for political reasons, and that's just flat wrong. So let me just state what I feel like you are implying and repudiate it. I have a strong record. I have a great commitment to this issue, and I am proud of what I've done and the progress we're making.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just want to clarify what I was saying. No, I was saying that you maybe really believe this all along, but, believe in gay marriage all along, but felt for political reasons America wasn't ready yet and you couldn't say it. That's what I was thinking.
No, that is not true.
It really is great how long you've supported gay marriage.
Yes. I could have supported it sooner.
Well, you did it pretty soon.
Could have been sooner.
Fair point.
I just want to thank people. I'm not really promoting the group right now. Not today, or probably, I don't remember, maybe it was yesterday. So maybe this is from yesterday. But I get a lot of people wanting to join up, and even when I'm not really going after people. So thanks for that. I want to thank you guys for at Democratic Party headquarters. You're my only investigative journalists. You're the only ones I have. I mean, your posts, yeah, a lot of the stories don't involve Democratic Party headquarters posts, but most of the ones that are relevant to Democratic Party headquarters and therefore are news, I mean, the posts that you make are usually very relevant. So here's one.
Good morning, fam. I tried to run a live just now, but I had to turn off my music. I don't want to be in Facebook jail, right? Look, brief live. I had to come to y'all today because I want to talk about the effects of the double standards that we face as the minority, which is really a majority in this city, right? Mr. Paul, one of my neighbors, all three of his vehicles were affected by the flood. So Mr. Paul had liability, and so Mr. Paul don't have off-street parking, so Mr. Paul had all his cars in front of his house like people from New Orleans do, right? So today, the people came, took all three of Mr. Paul's cars while he hustling, trying to get the money to get his cars right. Just, they said they were inoperable, so they had to be off the street. So they just came, took Mr. Paul's cars, and one of his vehicles was a truck that he used to scrap metal, like it's his livelihood, right? And he didn't get no money, and he just stuck out now. And so, if no one stands up to speak for the downtrodden,
yeah, nobody's going to listen to you. That's the problem. We need a much wider variety of social services. I mean, you might as well have just a department that covers everything that isn't covered. Our inability to, and he's going to talk about it here in just a second, about how it creates chaos. Well, yeah, because people will do what they have to survive, right? And that creates chaos, for sure. I mean, stealing and whatever. But we need to, excuse me, have far more social services. I mean, for instance, for a black guy or a guy, period, there's no such thing as welfare in this country. I mean, if you don't have somebody to depend on, like somebody who will let you live in their house, or, I mean, you can get food stamps. Now you can get health care, even though you're not 62 or 65 or whenever Medicaid kicks in. Medicare. I'm on Medicaid. That's Obamacare. And even if you could get it before, I don't know that, I mean, I didn't know. Somebody said that Medicare or Medicaid has always been available to me, but I never heard about anything about it. I mean, I heard of things like on TV you hear about people going to county, you know, and that's not county jail, although that's one way to get health care, right? But the county medical, like county hospital, is supposed to be, I don't know. Until they had Obamacare, I suffered a lot. Lost a lot of teeth because I couldn't afford to go to the dentist. It became cheaper to get them pulled than it was to get them filled. And that's how borderline my income was. And I'm telling you that certainly not to feel sorry for me, although you can if you want. And that happened while I was working, okay? You know, I was working every day in the hot, hot sun and the cold, cold, cold. And yet I didn't have money. Forget a doctor. I couldn't even afford, you know, to get fillings and stuff. So anyway, yeah, you know, he's going to talk about that, and he's absolutely right. I mean, people aren't beggars. I mean, they hate to beg, but they aren't, you know, moochers. That's not the nature of human beings. Sure, they don't enjoy work, but most people understand that they have to pitch in, right? All those common values that we have, doesn't matter whether you're black or white or Hispanic or Indian or whatever. Everybody pretty much agrees that, except for the rich, they want everybody else to do their work. And then they're going to sit there and brag about how hard they work to earn their money. Oh man, there's always one. They just creep in. They just come in here to cause trouble. The hill trolls. And yeah, that's just not going to fly with the people in my group. And they're going to start criticizing me if I don't delete it. Telling them to go buy her book. And I say I can save you the trip. That's what happened. That's what happened. Is Trump won. I mean, it's not hard to figure out, people. And I think I'll just send him one more. Or I might send him two. And these are all memes that I made, by the way. Except for this one, it was an Ann Coulter meme, and I just changed it to Hillary Clinton. So I put hill trolls. What hill trolls? And I just ran over Hillary Clinton. You're welcome.
New Hampshire. You told the crowd you, quote, take a backseat to no one when it comes to progressive values.
I take a backseat to no one when you look at my record and standing up and fighting for progressive values.
Last month in Ohio, you said you plead guilty to, quote, being kind of moderate and center. Do you change your political identity based on who you're talking to?
No, I think that, like most people that I know, I have a range of views, but they are rooted in my values and my experience.
You know, I get accused of being kind of moderate and center. I plead guilty.
Just for the record, are you a progressive or are you a moderate?
I'm a progressive.
Never before seen video of Hillary Clinton inside the Walmart empire. She is probably one of the most investigative politicians in American history. And this morning you're going to see her in a way you've never seen her before, serving on the board of Walmart. ABC News Chief Investigative Correspondent Brian Ross is here with details on this. Good morning, Brian.
Good morning, Robin. Although she makes no mention of it in her official biography, Hillary Clinton served for 6 years on the board of Walmart, a huge retailer criticized by many for its treatment of workers and its strident opposition to unions.
Pioneer who died Tuesday here in New York at the age of 88. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. As the nation marks the 16th anniversary this week of the September 11th attacks on the World Trade Center towers and the Pentagon, questions still swirl about the role of Saudi Arabia. 9/11 attacks were carried out by 19 hijackers. 15 of them were from Saudi Arabia. 16 years later, 9/11 families and survivors are continuing their efforts to take Saudi Arabia to trial. Just this week, the New York Post reported new evidence presented in the case alleging the Saudi embassy in Washington, D.C. paid for 2 Saudi nationals who were living in the U.S. undercover to fly from Phoenix to Washington, D.C., quote, in a dry run for the 9/11 attacks, unquote. The family's lawyers say the new allegations offer, quote, a pattern of both financial and operational support by the Saudi government. We go now to Washington, D.C., where we're joined by Andrew Coburn. His latest piece in Harper's is headlined Crime and Punishment. Will the 9/11 case finally go to trial? Welcome, Andrew. Can you please lay out that case?
Well, the case, it's a consolidation of various lawsuits that were brought in almost immediately after the attacks, and it alleges that the hijackers received material support and backing and both financial and organizational from agents of the Saudi government acting in their capacity as agents of the Saudi government, and therefore that the Saudi government is itself liable for the attacks on 9/11.
And talk about who the plaintiffs are.
Well, they're a whole bunch of people. They're 6,500 roughly in all. They are first of all, bereaved families, widows, parents, children, orphans, or not orphaned, but bereaved families whose husbands, sons, mothers were killed in the attacks. Also includes survivors, people who were in the attacks but managed to at least escape with their lives, even if they were injured. And it also includes insurance companies who had to pay out millions and billions of dollars in claims, but are now seeking to get some of that money back from the people they allege actually caused the attacks.
Andrew, last...
So, well, first of all, to get a lawyer like him, you have to kill like 3,000 people. That's kind of what American justice looks like these days. or you have to have enough money to hire somebody like him. I had a lawyer one time in Texas, or twice. In Texas, I got a DUI, and I'll tell you, I was drunk. I mean, I was wasted, and it was early 70s or late 70s. No, it was 84. Okay, so I was 24 years old. Yeah, I should have known better, you're right. But I didn't. I was talking about lawyers and lawyering and justice, and I'm going to talk a lot about justice in America. I'm American. I've lived here off and on all my life, except for 4.5 years in Lebanon, a year and a half in Indonesia, and about a half a year in Saudi Arabia. Well, my parents lived there for like 2 years, but I'd go there on summers and Christmas. So I spent 3 months there, and I spent a month in winter, another month in winter, and I don't know, short period in the summer. So anyway, so other than that, and 2 years in Belgium, in Brussels. So, and a lot of traveling. I mean, I've been all over the place. I've been around the world a couple of times. So, most of the time, though, generally speaking, the United States. And I mean, the United States is my area of expertise, next to Lebanon and the Middle East, in terms of experience. But I was talking about lawyering and lawyers, and I was saying that, you know, to get a lawyer like this, you have to kill 3,000 people. Actually, you have to be killed by somebody who killed like 3,000 people, is the way this one works out. Or you have to be rich, have a lot of money. And I was saying I only had lawyers twice. Well, I guess maybe 3 times. When I was like a kid, when I was like 20, and that's a kid to me. I mean, I was basically pretty immature until I was about 25. I mean, I was way mature for my age in a lot of ways, but I was surrounded by people who encouraged me to do just the worst things. And some of them wouldn't do those things themselves. They encouraged me to do, like one guy talked me into bouncing a check. You know, he's like, what do you care? You'll be in some foreign country in a year and they won't even bother to look for you. You know? Like, okay. Next thing you know, I'm in court, right? But I never even had to go to court for that. Somebody paid my mom and dad, or anyway, mommy and daddy paid for a lawyer. And I didn't even have to go to court. And so the next time I had a lawyer, had some slick guy down in Houston, and I didn't even go into the courtroom. He went in and he got the whole thing dropped. And he told me, whatever you do, if you ever get pulled over drunk again, or for drunk driving, get accused of it, don't take the test. And I was like, okay. So then when I moved to Lexington, so here I am like 31, still drinking and driving, partying and going crazy, you know, mostly in the pursuit of women and things like that. Just not anything that, I mean, I don't think I'm a bad guy for that. Drinking and driving, yeah. Drinking too much. I usually behave pretty well when I've been drinking. Anyway, when they pulled me over, I hadn't been drinking. I had gone out drinking with a friend of mine, and I'd gotten home about 12 midnight and gone to sleep. And I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I was puttering around. And about 4:30, I was out in the parking lot of my apartment complex, just bored, you know. It's kind of, and then I thought, well, I'll try and start my car. I had an RX-7, and I didn't know it at the time, but it had a problem with the engine. At 145,000 miles, almost on the dot, those engines there, they had ceramics in them and they go bad. And I didn't know that. And the car will still run, but it'll stop running and then you won't be able to get it started for a long time. And so I'd been going through that for a long time, and I was always hoping that, you know, once I got it started, I should drive it and blow it out a little bit. That doesn't mean drive fast or anything, and I didn't drive fast that night. As a matter of fact, it was Saturday night, and or Sunday morning, and I didn't want to get pulled over, because I mean the cops are everywhere in Lexington on a Saturday until like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. Anyway, so I, to my surprise, it started, and I got in it and I drove down the, it's called Manowar, to, Nicholasville Road, which goes down to UK, and I drove down nearly to UK, like where the stadium is, where the University of Kentucky plays football and stuff, and I wanted to turn around and head back. You know, I figured, well, that's enough to, you know, get it all blown out. So, and this is all about my lawyer, but I figure you're gonna need to know what it was all about. So I'd gotten, the ticket I'd gotten before that was for making a U-turn on like Saturday night, late at night, on Richmond Road, which is another road just like Nicholasville Road. So I was like, okay, well, I don't want to make a U-turn on Nicholasville Road right here. There's probably a cop around. So I made a left-hand turn and started looking for a place I could pull in and turn around, because the streets are real narrow and they've got cars parked all along the sides. So you can't make a U-turn in the street. Even there, because you're just off of a main street in downtown and you don't want to make U-turns, it's just all bad. So you're looking for a parking lot, right, where you can turn around. And I see this car go back behind this building, and I see its lights, and I can see that there's a parking garage and a parking area back there, and quite an area of space. So I pull in there, and as I'm going down the side of the building to get to the back where there's a parking lot, this girl opens the door to the side of the building and steps in, and as she does, she turns around and looks at me. She can see me in the side of in my window, on my side window, and she just gives me this really nasty look, you know, and I'm like, fuck you, you know, bitch. I had no idea who this girl was. Well, it turns out that she's a titty dancer, and she was returning from working on Winchester Road, which is 5 or 10 miles in opposite direction where I came from. And I've been down there, you know, but that night I was nowhere near that place. I mean, maybe she knew my car or something, because maybe I drove it down there. And I might have even known her. I never found out who she was. I just found out that she was some titty dancer. I think my lawyer mentioned it to me. And so I'm coming back out. I turned around, came back out, made a left to head back to Nicholasville Road. And at the first stop sign, a block away from Nicholasville Road, this cop pulls me over, and I'm like, what the fuck, man? And then, you know, he asked me if I'd been drinking tonight, and I said not since, you know, 5 hours ago. And he goes, well, you're under arrest. And I go, wait a minute, why did you even pull me over? Did you see me do anything to pull me over for? And he goes, no. So that right there, it's an illegal, what he's doing is illegal. I mean, he has to see me do something. He says, a girl called and said you were following her. I've never followed a girl in my life. I mean, maybe in a situation where you're, you know, girls and guys do get together and for one reason or another they'll follow each other, you know, not in a bad way. So I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't stalking her, you know, and I didn't know her, and I had not, until I saw her walking in the side of her building. I hadn't seen her before, and I don't think I knew her. Although, like I say, you never know. And those people who work in those titty bars, I'm sure they get stalkers all the time, and I know one got murdered, and they found her in the back of a dumpster with her arms and legs and heads missing. And, you know, that was a girl named Linda, and you know, I had met her, and that's awful to know somebody and find out that they ended up like that. So they have a lot of problems, right? And so I can understand, but the cops need to stop this. They can't just go around arresting people without, I mean, he could have followed me home, could have made a note of where I lived and my car and my license plate and everything, but until he sees me do something, because I think probably the bigger crime here is the millions of people who get harassed by the cops who don't do anything, like me that night. I mean, they actually put me in jail, and then, like, I got a lawyer and paid $1,000 for this jackass, and we go into court, and I'm standing there, and I don't even get to say anything, and he says, how do you plead, guilty or innocent? And then he says, before you plead, let me tell you something. If you don't plead guilty, I'm going to file charges against you for stalking this girl that's in the report, and I'm going to throw the book at you. And I look at my lawyer, and he just shrugs. I mean, that's the kind of lawyer you get, right? I mean, what the fuck is that? And I should have pled innocent, but if I pled guilty, he said all I'd get was 6 months probation, and all that meant really was sending in a letter every month and going to these classes where you talk about drinking and stuff, and you pretend for 6 months that you don't drink anymore. I mean, basically, in order to get them to sign off on it. So, I mean, because I still drink. I mean, there's nothing wrong with drinking. It's the behavior that accompanies it sometimes that is the problem. And that's the thing, is you shouldn't ever get in trouble, end up in trouble with the law over drugs or alcohol, right? If you get in trouble, it ought to be because of your behavior. I mean, if you're drunk and you're walking down the street punching people or whatever, okay, well, you go to jail for punching people, and maybe on top of that you get a drunk and disorderly and that kind of thing. But if you're drunk and you're walking down the street and you're nice to everybody and you're not doing anything bad, why mess with you? Why try and make your life? I mean, if I didn't have mommy and daddy to take care of me back then, I would have ended up in jail and in a system that would have probably kept me there the rest of my life. I mean, I probably would have done things in and out of jail that would get me back into jail. I mean, I know that's how it works. So that was my last lawyer that I dealt with, and they're useless. I mean, you need to study the law, and you need to read up, and you need to. They do everything to terrify you, but the fact is the law is not that complicated. As a matter of fact, we pretty much know the law, as it should be anyway, which is don't hurt people, innocent people, and you know, that's almost the whole law. There you are, a degree in law. Don't hurt innocent people. You know. So that's how you get into these. Okay, so let's see. So what this guy is saying is that because a bunch of corporations, a bunch of insurance companies are going after Saudi Arabia in this lawsuit, that we get all the things that you would normally get in a trial. So now we've got all this information. It's called discovery. We have the reports of FBI people for sure in San Diego, and they are proving to show that Saudi Arabian officials were in on 9/11 and were funding and like he said, this lawyer said, he said that you'd almost have to have a state or something like that, something with a lot of resources at their fingertips to pull off a 9/11. And that when you look at this, you can see that. You can see all the funding and all the training, and like he says, they were like hillbillies, like Saudi hillbillies. You know, they weren't like incredibly smart. They had to learn and be taught everything that they needed to know to pull it off. So what it shows me, and I don't know if he really mentioned it, is that our government, the FBI in San Diego, and obviously Mueller, who the establishment Democrats just heap praises upon him. Everybody should know, anybody who knows anything about anything should know that there's nothing about the FBI that's good. I mean, I can go back you know, all the way to the Kennedy assassination, and how about the Red Scare, you know, the FBI was in on just screwing everybody during the McCarthy era, and I'm pretty sure the FBI had a hand in the Kennedy assassination. So anybody who knows anything about anything knows you can't trust the FBI, and yet establishment Democrats, anytime the FBI seems to be working in their favor, so like Mueller is supposed to nail Trump, right? Which I hope he does. You know, Trump is an ass. He's like, Republicans are just like Democrats that have gone to another level of asshole, right? So I don't have any love for them either, but establishment Democrats are what makes it easy for them to operate, and they work together so often. So the FBI has always been a problem, you know, going, and God, all my life, all I heard about was what a great man, was it Hoover, or whatever, the guy, you know, the guy, head of the FBI, and he turned out to just be a total scumbag and probably totally gay as well, from what I understand. So it's no surprise to me to find out that they were in on the first 9/11, not 9/11, but the World Trade Center bombing, where a bomb was sent off in the basement. I mean, am I right? Did they actually supply the explosives? Trying to, and you know, because they're so secretive, we'll never know, you know, what their part was in a lot of these things. But we do know some of what their part was, and we know that those were notorious and, at the very least, incredibly stupid. So what we consider to be like one of our top law enforcement bureaus, when you really look at it, if anything, it's corrupt, and if it's not corrupt, then they're just fucking stupid, the shit that they've done. And I can just, you know, if I started looking through my stuff, I could just come up with case after case. But you can get on the internet and Google FBI and corruption and things like that and come up with more than I can in 5 seconds. That is, if you've got a slow internet connection. So he's saying they knew about these guys all along. Okay, did they know that they were going to fly planes into buildings? Well, I'd say probably. I mean, I don't see any absolute proof of that. They were definitely following these guys around. Why would they be following them around, checking up on them, and know that they were going all training to go? I mean, if they really thought they were just training to become airline pilots and fly for some airlines, then why bother? You know, why put the manpower and the resources into it? No, you just kick back and wait for something more substantial, right? But there was substantial things. That's why they were following these guys around and supplying them. They were actually working with people, supplying, you know, they wanted to see how far they were going. They wanted to have a way to know what was going on with them. Well, they wouldn't want to know that if they really thought they were just training to be airline pilots. That's bullshit. So and on top of that, what he's saying is that, and he doesn't really come out and say this, but it's important that the insurance companies are in on this, because the other people are just tagging on, right? They're just holding on to them, hoping that they'll get some money out of it and something, right? They just want something. They certainly, I would say they certainly want people to know. I mean, a lot of this is about American politicians like Bush and what are their real loyalties. It becomes obvious that their real loyalties are to Saudi Arabia rather than the American people, and you know, anti-Iran or Iraq, pro-Saudi, even though Iraq didn't have anything to do with it, or very little, if any.
Last year, I interviewed former Senator Bob Graham, the former chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, co-chair of the Joint Congressional Inquiry into the 9/11 terrorist attacks. This is what he said.
Immediately after 9/11, the government began to look for suspects who had helped these hijackers, and they focused on Iraq. They even had a concocted story that a representative of Saddam Hussein had met with al-Qaeda operatives in Prague, in the Czech Republic. That turned out to be false. My feeling is that what happened is they wanted to go to war with Iraq, had wanted to, particularly people like Cheney and Rumsfeld, and it was embarrassing to find out that the information that was becoming available seemed to more point to Saudi Arabia as having been the country that aided the 9/11 rather than Iraq. And so the response to that is, let's suppress the information about Saudi Arabia's involvement so that we don't confuse the people in the Congress as we push hard to get authorization for war in Iraq.
That's the former U.S. Senator Bob Graham. Talk more about what he's saying, Andrew Coburn.
Well, that's right. I mean, in a way, there's one thing that the Bush administration and Senator Graham agreed on, which was that for the hijacking, for the 9/11 operation to succeed, they had to have had the support of the structured support of a nation state. I mean, in terms of money, in terms of contacts, in terms of, these were a bunch of basically sort of hicks who, most of them, who, arrived in this country, didn't speak English, didn't know people, and so they were all taken care of and found places to live and given money and, steered to flying lessons. It was a very sophisticated or well-organized operation, and that had to have been, in Graham's view, and it seems in mine too, had to have been done by a state. Now, the Bush administration tried to say it was Iraq. In fact, they so wanted it to be Iraq, or wanted people to believe it was Iraq, that interrogators at Guantanamo were under instructions to torture detainees in Guantanamo into admitting, falsely, that this link between Iraq and the 9/11 hijackings.
So,
see, this is where we get into why Republicans are worse than even establishment Democrats. But then again, who else voted for that torture? Oh, gee, people like Pelosi, Feinstein, Schumer, they voted for torture. So who's worse? Establishment Democrats or Republicans? I mean, they're all fucked, man, and Obama's right on the top there. I mean, he wasn't. He more or less works for them, for establishment Democrats. He's beholden to them to become president. He's beholden to them for the vast amount of wealth that he will acquire now that he's out of office. Because that's how it works. You don't just get handed a lump sum of money for doing... I mean, I believe these people are evil. While I don't believe in, religious fire and brimstone and hell and the devil and all that kind of thing, although there's every indication that what's going on is manifestations of that on earth, and I see these people, there's the Capitol building right there. I see Bush and Hillary and Bill and all of them as being either wittingly or unwittingly pawns, and their actions manifestation of hell on earth. Even though I don't believe in the Bible and hell and all that, but after a while you gotta wonder, right? I mean, could it all be true? Could there be some way, where evil exists as a force? Because it does feel, when I look around the world, it does feel like there are forces at work. I mean, you know how when you try and do something, quite often it's like everything's working against you? And like the more good you're trying to do and the harder you try, I mean, I'll be trying to do something important for people, right? like make this show or something. And it's like the harder I try, the more things break and stop working. And like yesterday I was working on Tuesday's, well, Monday I was working on Monday's show, and everything just kept getting in the way of me working on the show. And then on Tuesday I got back to work on it, and at this point I can't even get the damn thing to come out. It just keeps crashing on me, and it took forever. I had it all done like this yesterday, and I went to click on save, and before I could get there, this screen came up and said Movavi had crashed. So I was like, okay, well, I'll go back and reboot and restart the program, and it said there was a backup made right when it crashed, and so I clicked to open up that backup, and it disappeared. It was right here. It was in I save it into I have my Democratic Party headquarters news, and I was working on episode 10 or 11. So anyway, it was here, just like this one here. See this? Okay, it says Democratic Party headquarters news 3, September 12th, 2017. See, I've been renaming it because I started it for the 11th, and that got screwed up. And then I was working on it on the 12th, and there was a file just like that, a temp file. And what you do is you rename it. You take the TMP, the .tmp off the end of it, and you rename it an MEP, and then you run it. Then you click on it to run it, because it'll show up as an MEP file. And I did that, and I forget what happened. Maybe Movavi came up and then disappeared or something. But when I went back to look for the Democratic Party headquarters news September 12th, 2017 MEP, it was gone. The one I had renamed to .mep was gone. It was gone completely. I was like, can you know, I thought I saved myself. I thought I was going to be able to bring back up, you know, this, but the previous, because I did the exact same thing, and then I had to go and rebuild all this. And I mean, this is a lot of work. It takes me about 2 hours to make one of these programs, and plus I'm only working with stuff that I'm videotaping, just like I'm videotaping this right now. And I'm just using a little car cam, by the way, but I find this the best way, and I avoid any complications with copywritten material, because instead of using their actual video, I'm just using a video I make of their video, which I think it's legal for me to use their video just to do my show. Like, you can put things in quotes in a book or a newspaper article or even a post, you know. So if you can do that, you can use these like quotes, you know, videos and stuff. Although I don't know, I mean, that's part of the problem with America. You know, I was talking about lawyers earlier. Well, here's another thing about lawyers, is you can get away with anything unless you're poor. So like, if you've got a big show and you want to throw in some video of somebody saying something or something, nobody will bother you, or you may have the money to pay for it, in which case nobody will bother you. But if you're a poor little guy like me, I guess I don't want to jinx myself, but you know, I would bet that some people eventually come along and tell me, oh, well, you can't use that video, even though it's just from a little cam like this. So anyway, the point is that it does seem like there are forces at work, and it does seem like there is good and evil. I don't want to believe that there's like either invisible or people that are like demons, you know. But I have to say I do believe that there are forces at work that, now, whether they're evil or malevolent or whatever, I don't know. And I don't know that there really are. I mean, maybe I was just unlucky for 2 days in a row. No, I'm not buying that shit. See what I mean? So, I do believe in good and evil. And I do believe that people like Trump and Bush and in their own way, a very different way, but still just as bad and in some ways worse, establishment Democrats, so Obama, Clintons, and then I see all of the, I mean, most of the rest of the world is good, right? I mean, all of you people out there, except for a few that are hill trolls that are just trying to spy and think you can cause damage or whatever you're doing, you know. Other than those, the rest of you out there are, I gotta tell you, amazing people. I mean, yeah, sometimes we fight because you get mad because you're like, no, we can't use the name Democrat, we must be Green Party. Okay, whatever, you know, we're still on the same side. We still believe in all the same things. You're still good, I'm still good. So let's fight about it, but let's not make it like between us and establishment Democrats. I mean, establishment Democrats and us fighting, you can feel the negative, positive going on there, the good, the evil. Even if they don't know they're evil. You know, they're like zombies. They're like people who are under the influence of the evil. And, you know, to be evil and not know it, and therefore to basically try to sneak your way in and sabotage, I think that's far more evil. And the whole thing is evil because it's all going on in the name of evil, right? I mean, if you were on the good side and you were trying to get into the Republican Party and sabotage, so if I was trying to get into Republican groups so that I could cause trouble, that's a negative and a positive, which comes out neutral. But when you're negative and you're trying to get into something good and bring it down, and when you're doing it under the guise of good, that's really, really bad. I mean, at least, well, I guess none of them are, I mean, they're all like that. Republicans, I think a lot of them actually believe they're good, but a lot of them don't, too. A lot of them know that, or maybe they still think they're good, right? They're these ends justify the means kind of people. Let me tell you something. The ends do not justify the means. The end is the means. Okay, so you're working to make sure that your friends stay safe from terrorism and you do all these horrible things to people, other Americans who are innocent and stuff, but in the end, your friends are safe, and let's say they would have died. Well, you would have been better off to let them die, because everybody dies, and even if we didn't, we wouldn't condone hurting innocent people to keep us alive. I mean, that's what terrorists do, right? And when they do it to people, it doesn't make us evil. But when we torture people and kill people, I mean, we kill lots of people. In the end, there's still terrorism, maybe even more terrorism, and on top of that, we're evil. Or I'm not, but my country, the people in my country who back all this stuff, they are. So you've committed all these, and a lot of these people are innocent, it turns out. So all you've achieved is making yourself evil. I mean, here you are, you've done all this stuff, and you're a torturer, you're a murderer. There's more terrorism than ever. If you can't understand that, and if you just continue to be under the influence of this idea that the ends justifies the means, well, just like I think that it's pretty obvious that there is good and evil in the world forces at work, I think that when you die, you find out. I think that's one of the things that happens to you when you leave your body and you become one with the universe, and you gain, I think you gain complete knowledge of the universe in that afterlife and before life. And in that state you become good. At least I hope so. I'm sure you at least I mean, maybe you stay evil if you don't accept the truth. If you're given the truth but but you don't accept it. Maybe that's what becomes like kind of the scary part of death, right? That you would die and watch something like What Dreams May Come with Robin Williams. It's kind of along the lines of what I'm talking about right now, and lots of other philosophies. What can I tell you? I've been studying philosophy and religion since I was in my first year of high school. They don't really cover it much in public school, except for you get some good teachers and they'll tell you to read Tom Sawyer and stuff like that. Some good books, but in Catholic school we studied all the great, like Lao Tzus, and so we studied religion going all the way back, which incorporates all kinds of philosophy. And of course I learned to do it on my own, to pick up on all the stuff that I missed out on in school, because they kind of have their own agenda and I have my own agenda. So you learn about stuff like that in Catholic schools, I can tell you that. And I'm not Catholic in any way, but I ended up spent most of my, well, 2nd grade in Catholic school, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th in Catholic school, 9th grade in a college preparatory Catholic school. I don't think it was Catholic, but I went to St. Clair's in Oxford. You know, it's got the saint thing in front of it, but it wasn't a religious school. But then I ended up in St. Thomas, University of St. Thomas in Houston. And that, I mean, we were required to take teachings of the Catholic Church and teachings of Jesus, and I took Christian metaphysics and took a lot of bullshit, really, because I mean, it's all nonsense. And as a guy who probably could have graduated with a degree in theology, I'll tell you, I mean, wow, what a waste of your life studying Christianity. I mean, it's bad enough that we get enough of it just in our lives. At least we used to. I think it's the same still for a lot of people, because during the Bush years, there was this big push to get back to religion, and I can tell you that there is an organized and unorganized push towards religion in this country. I mean, it goes on almost at a subconscious level. I mean, we say, oh my God, like Muslims say Allah Akbar, right? Which means basically the same thing. When they see something bad happen or something, they'll go, Allah Akbar, you know. And they use it for more than that, but they also use, you know, our languages tell us and everybody else a lot about us, and we're very religion oriented, even if we're anti-religious, like people like me. I mean, we say, our speech shows that anyway. So sometimes it feels like things like torture and warfare, wars like the war in Iraq and Syria and stuff, it feels like, you know, like there's demons on earth in human form becoming presidents and stuff. Like, if I really believed in demons, I would say George Bush and his whole family and Rumsfeld and all those people were actually like demons from hell who came here and, you know, they talk pretty and everything and get into power, and then they create Iraq wars and Afghan wars and torture on a massive scale, death on a massive scale. But I don't believe in that, so I have a hard time with it. I have to say that it's more likely that there's a force and that it acts and manifests itself through these people. Alright, I've said enough about that. Back to this, so I don't even remember how I got on the subject now, so let's get back to the subject.
So why was Iraq the focus? I mean, if you polled most people in the United States, they would not know that 15 of the 19 hijackers were from Saudi Arabia. Why was it in the interest, do you believe, of the state to do this?
Well, first of all, you know, the relationship with Saudi Arabia is so sacrosanct in the eyes of the, if you want to call it, the sort of ruling apparatus.
And I have to think that the reason that it's so sacred, number one, is going to be the oil, right? I mean, we've all kind of touched on that. I mean, everybody's kind of in agreement on that. But having been there, I have to say that a small group of Americans, including my father, have made really good friends with the Saudis, who they fork over money to run the country and keep any threats to their oil flowing down. But it becomes a lot more than that. You know, if you're there, you see it. You see how, even though they don't even spend much time together, but they kind of love each other. I mean, they're loving on each other's because they love what they're doing for their masters, like the Bushes and all the other Americans who are over there, you know, lapping up the oil. But if you're not a very good person, the money has an effect on you. I mean, I can't tell you how many people my dad would have absolutely hated if it wasn't for the fact that there was money flowing to him and other people, not the millions, but maybe 100,000 a year. I mean, that was a huge thing for a little hillbilly off of a farm who went out and got mixed up with the wrong kind of people for a short period of time, but didn't really fall in too far with them, but ended up hanging out with the mafia or mob, because they weren't Italian, I don't think. And other people, I mean, my dad used to talk about how some people did cocaine, and this is back in the 50s and early 60s, and people like him were kind of the counterculture to the counterculture. So they were the culture, right? They were the ones who weren't hippies and beatniks and stuff. They were trying to be all straight-laced and follow the rules and toe the party line and all that kind of stuff. And yet they found that the world wasn't very nice to them. So what did they do? Well, first they went into the army because they couldn't get a job doing much of anything. They didn't have any college. They just barely graduated from high school. But before that, my dad wandered around and ended up with the mafia and stuff. And he told me in Wichita and Kansas City. So my dad was everything you wanted to be to get involved with neocons, right? Because the neocons have a lot to do with mafias and mobs and black markets and all that kind of crooked shit. Although, as they move up, they wash their hands to try and make them look clean, right? So, then, if you're a dumbass hillbilly American, like my dad, I love him to death, but I can't ignore the reality of his life, and I know most of the details, things that my mom doesn't even know. I tell her these things and she's like, "You sure we're talking about the same person?" She doesn't say that, but she's like, "I don't remember that. I don't remember that." And she married the dude. So my dad and I used to talk a lot, so when we weren't fighting, because obviously I'm a liberal or whatever you want to call me. So then at some point, to get away from all that, I think he joined the army. And boy, after a little while, he was just, he rose all the way to the top. And then got super high clearance, security clearance, so he could handle nuclear weapons and all kinds of stuff. And almost went to Lebanon in '59 because of the crisis there to support Shamoun. And lo and behold, ends up in Lebanon in 68, 69, and then 72, 75, till the end of 75. And he's there the whole time while the United States is trying to get the PLO, well, kill people like Arafat and, control the situation, whatever. Well, I mean, is it any wonder that a guy like him ends up being involved in intelligence in some way? Even though it's completely informal, even though it's completely secret. I mean, he would never... I think that if he hadn't been intelligence, and I think basically he was Army Intel, but if he hadn't been, I think he probably would have made something up and said he was. He never said anything about anything. And all the coincidences, they couldn't be coincidences. I mean, having all these people, super important people, our friends, the Shamouns, the Salem's, all these people, they're top of the food chain for the intelligence industry, right? So there's no way that my dad was just, and his, his jobs. He just was not qualified to be doing the jobs that, he was just the right person at the right time, and you have to assume. I'm not going to go into all the details here. I've talked about plenty of them before. But right now we're talking about 9/11. But as far as that, when I was in Saudi Arabia, of course, I met bin Laden. But on top of that, he didn't tell me at the time, but he was doing business with the bin Ladens. So, there you go. Just tons and tons of coincidences. And how do I know he was doing business with the bin Ladens? Is because he told me. He said, part of the construction and buying and selling construction materials and all that kind of stuff, which basically is job, importing and exporting them and stuff. He said dealing with the bin Ladens on a regular basis. Well, that's how intelligence really works, is they put you in a job where you're dealing with the people who they want you dealing with in intelligence ways. So they want you dealing with bin Ladens and people like that to build an army, a small army that's going to go to Afghanistan and build a larger army out of Afghans, right? Well, you put them in a job where they're dealing with the Saudi Arabians who they're going to be sending over there, bin Laden and his crew, whoever they were. I don't really know. I avoided all that, as I described in an early episode of the news. So that's how most of intelligence works. To look at the people involved on the outside, they're really not, they're not doing anything nefarious. They're not doing anything like raising armies and paying off people, and they don't actually do the payoffs. And the payoffs don't even go on. What happens is business happens and money changes hands. So everything looks, when you look at it, when it comes to a professional intelligence agency, everything looks like, okay, it's just a guy he's selling sewing machines, he's going to Muscat and Oman and Libya, and my dad was all over the place all the time. He was not home most of the time in Lebanon. And the money that's changing hands, it's not for spying or for influencing or anything like that. It's just business taking place. So most of what goes on, except for in some cases, like appropriating money for this and that, it's just, and they do that because then if somebody does get nosy, that's all they'll see. So they'll just see people with jobs, working for Chemical Bank, working for Singer sewing machines, an American got a job with Muhammad Ali Rezaiat, one of the largest. It's just a normal job. He's just doing business with bin Ladens. That's what it looks like in the end. And that's how they get around. It's only the morons, or maybe not morons, I shouldn't say that, because they did pull off 9/11. The only time you find out where you see illegal money and stuff that points to is when it comes down to a violent act like 9/11. And then you start looking at the money and you can trace it backwards, but you'll never trace it back to my dad or to any other operative out there. And it'll only trace back to a few people, you know, close to the terrorists. But you could, if you were omnipotent, you could trace the money all the way back to Bush's and people like that, and their funding of these third world dictators and stuff, who turn around and stab America in the back. So
in this country, and it runs very, very deep. You know, there's all sorts of aspects to it. Most vividly, obviously, the huge financial benefits that flow, at least to the U.S. defense industry, the U.S. military-industrial complex, in terms of arms contracts, consultancy.
See, and so the first person that my dad worked for was Assam Khashoggi in Beirut. He got a job that running the factory for Condis, a furniture interior design company. Well, obviously Assam's older brother is Adnan Khashoggi, and what is his business? He made his mark by selling fighter jets to Saudi Arabia, being the middleman on all that. Probably he was probably one of the people involved in the Lockheed scandal. You know, because that's how they did it. They would bribe people to do big things, and then they would make a profit off of it. And now it's illegal, of course, whereas it's perfectly legal in some Arab countries to spread money around. I mean, we do it legally, but we do it through business deals. But they bribed congressmen, and yeah, and we don't, I mean, we do overseas, but if you try and bribe a congressman here in the United States and get caught, you're in deep shit. But they did it, and they kind of had a bit of immunity, but eventually Adnan did get in some trouble. But so there's what I was talking about, is connections between that are not really a coincidence to me. So my dad was working for the younger brother of Adnan Khashoggi, and that ties him into Saudi Arabia and everything else, and kind of explains how later on, because he developed all his relationships with what would become the king of Saudi Arabia, and I've got pictures of them together. I think his name was, I can't remember, he was Prince something or other before he was king. So all these connections, right? All these connections between my dad and all these people. And I still say it was just because he was a young hillbilly, seemed malleable probably to the people who wanted to use him, got the right training in the military and the right connections there, and so when this guy here is talking about the money that's being made through the defense industry, well, that makes me think of my dad making that connection to Adnan Khashoggi through his brother. I mean, I grew up for the first 18 years of my life, 17, 18 years of my life, being part of their family. Assam Khashoggi, Mona and Kareem. The reason that we knew them was my mom and Doris, trying to remember her maiden name. Anyway, they were like this. I mean, they were best friends. And they came out of high school together, and they were bound and determined they weren't going to end up marrying some guy from Corning, California, where they went to high school. And they ended up in San Francisco, where I think my dad knew who she was, and knew that she was hanging out with Doris, and knew that Doris was dating Assam, because Doris and Assam, they got married, of course, had 2 kids, Mona and Kareem. You know, my mom and Doris were just inseparable. They lived together all the time, rented apartments together, shared their whole lives. And I shared their whole lives, and they shared our lives all the way till we got into a huge fight. And my mother and her mother went their own ways. It's kind of like a divorce. So she married Assam Khashoggi, right? And Adnan was there too, but I don't know why Doris chose Assam over Adnan. Maybe Adnan already had his plans, but Adnan was going to college at I forget, I think it's Chico State in Chico, California. Adnan and Assam were both there, and my mom and Doris were kind of double dating them, from what I understand. And so our lives were, even though I wasn't even born, were bound together at that point in like 1957, 58 in Chico, California. Well, my dad had gone through all his stuff by 60, by 59, and had become the military person he was, and was bouncing around in 70, or in San Francisco. And it's just not that far of a jump to say that somebody in military intel said, well, there's this lady, Cheryl Canny, that's her maiden name, and she's best friends with Doris, whatever, McGillicuddy or whatever her name was, I forget. And she's marrying Assam Khashoggi, and Assam Khashoggi is Adnan Khashoggi's younger brother, who is the guy who's doing all this stuff and obviously going places, right? How about you go get involved with, because I mean, my dad says that he just saw her walking down the street one day. He said he saw her ponytail bobbing up and down, and you know, that was it. And I've talked to my mom several times, and it just seemed like he targeted her. I hate to say this, I mean, it sounds so kind of, I mean, it seems like he, I mean, he didn't meet her through a friend. She thinks he did, but he told me that he just saw her on the street one day. And I find what he says a lot more compelling than what she says. He probably got her to believe that he met her through, I think she says that he met her through one of her other friends' husbands. But maybe that's just a convenient way of getting her to remember it. So what if he did just basically target her so that he could get involved in all this stuff? Is that so hard to believe? I mean, I would do it if I was working a job like that. And nice looking girl. I mean, my mom's wonderful, when she was young, she was beautiful, and she still is for an old lady.
A military flight flies over Saudi Arabia, which they really have to do to get to the big bases in the Gulf. They have to ask permission from the Saudis, which the Saudis, just to jerk our chain, occasionally refuse. There was subsidies on the price of oil for a long time. There was allegedly support in the worldwide network of mosques. So, you know, this was the idea that we would, even though they just attacked us, that we would sort of suddenly turn on the Saudis. I think just didn't compute.
Can you talk about Michael Jacobson, who he was and what he uncovered, Andrew?
He's absolutely key. Let me say, Jacobson was an investigator on the Senate, the joint inquiry by the House and Senate Intelligence Committees, which was chaired by Bob Graham, that was set up right after the attacks. Jacobson was an investigator in that, and really early on he noticed an odd discrepancy, an odd mention in FBI files here in Washington that seemed to say that one of the hijackers had been in contact with an FBI informant. He thought this was quite interesting, and he wanted to put in to go to San Diego. This is a hijacker, sorry, I should say, who'd been living in San Diego. He pushed to go to San Diego to look into the files in the local FBI office. Interestingly, the then head of the FBI, Mr. Mueller, Robert Mueller, now investigating the Trump allegations about Donald Trump, moved heaven and earth to stop Jacobson going to San Diego. Nevertheless, the committee insisted he do so, and he went there and found most of what we know about the Saudi connection. He found that in the files there was plenty of information about a Saudi agent, Mr. al-Bayoumi, who everyone in the FBI certainly out there believed was a Saudi agent, who had been in close contact with the hijackers, who had found them a place to live in San Diego, had opened a bank account for them, had helped them, introduced them to people who helped them get flying lessons, helped them to get driver's licenses, had basically been their case officer, it seemed. This was all turned up in, I could go on, there's other people, there were checks that went from the Saudi embassy in Washington that went more or less, indirectly, but in a pretty straightforward procedure, to the hijacker, or to Mr. Bayoumi, for looking after the hijackers, Mr. Bayoumi himself.
And now, those checks he's talking about, from what I understand, were from maybe some of you are too young to even know about this kind of things, but at the time, what do we call him? Prince Bandar, but they called him Bandar Bush because he spent so much time hanging out with the president, George Bush. In fact, if you watch Fahrenheit 9/11, you'll see something which a lot of us knew before the movie ever came out. As a matter of fact, I didn't even watch the movie. I didn't really know what it was about for a long time. But we studied up on. People like me who study this stuff, we knew about it, and they didn't even talk about this. So his wife, she facilitated that check, or at least one of them, for $100,000. Or I'm sorry, this would be totally different. This goes to Muhammad Atta down in Florida. Maybe he was in. Matter of fact, I think he might have been in San Diego for a while, but I'm not sure about that. And it's been a long time since I've been deep into this stuff. And the reason that I was deep into it was because I suspected my father, because he was in Saudi Arabia working with Saudis, and that was, you'll have to go back and watch a previous episode to see what happened to me concerning bin Laden, which is still weirds me out thinking about what happened with that. But my dad was definitely not there to you know, trade widgets or whatever he was supposed to be doing in his job. Actually, I know what he was doing. And I never realized it until later, but he wasn't doing very much work. So I'd see some catalogs around once in a while. Supposedly he was making some deals here and there. But what he was really doing was he was he was gathering together Osama and a few others to go over to Afghanistan. And I'll probably get into that more some other time. But anyway, the point is that Bandar Bush's wife used, I'll have to look up the bank, but it's a famous CIA front bank in Washington, D.C. Got one of Bush's brothers was the chairman of the board or president or something, and she went directly to him to get the money to go through to Muhammad Atta, $100,000. And that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about what was going on in San Diego, and I don't know if that was before the Venice Air School in Florida or if it was going on at the same time, because obviously there were at least three people trained to fly. Maybe there were four. I don't know. They might have had a backup. But we'll listen to the rest of this.
Worked for a company owned by the Saudi Ministry of Defense.
Andrew, we just have 20 seconds, but the subtitle of your piece, will the 9/11 case finally go to trial, will it?
Yes, I mean, despite the best efforts of the U.S. government and court system, it's moving remorselessly toward that. We've had the complaint, we've had the motion to dismiss, that'll be answered. Looks like sometime next year we'll actually get an actual trial going. And the Saudis, I might say, are freaked out about this. They're making every effort to derail this thing, to try and get the law changed so that they can't be sued.
We're going to have to leave it there, but we will continue to follow.
And he mentioned earlier that the reason that it's getting support now is because now the insurance companies are in it, you know. That's what it takes to get anything to happen in this country is, you know, so they want their money because they insured. And didn't I read that one of the Bushes was either insured the World Trade Center or something? So what was I going to say about this in general? So they knew.
Walmart's opposition to unions was led for decades by labor lawyer John Tate, who after his retirement proudly recalled at this company meeting in 2004 what he said was his favorite phrase.
Labor unions are nothing but blood-sucking parasites living off of the productive labor of people who work for a living.
Hillary Clinton was not present at this Walmart meeting, but Tate was relied on for years to keep unions out at Walmart, including during the 6 years from 1986 to 92, when Clinton was on the Walmart board and Tate was either an executive or a member of the board himself.
In the continental U.S., Hurricane Irma's death toll rose to 31 after 8 elderly residents of a nursing home in Hollywood, Florida, were found dead after they languished without air conditioning in sweltering conditions. The discovery of the deaths prompted a local hospital just down the street from the rehabilitation center at Hollywood Hills to send in more than 50 medical workers under a mass casualty protocol. 158 people were evacuated, many with severe dehydration and other heat-related symptoms. An administrator at the nursing home said temperatures spiked Tuesday night after air conditioners went down due to damage from Hurricane Irma. Hollywood Police Chief Thomas Sanchez says his department is investigating the incident as a crime.
This is very tragic. It's very sad. Many of us have loved ones in assisted living facilities, and we expect that care to be there for those people. We immediately started a criminal investigation into this matter and made sure that everyone was evacuated, and we took control of the entire building immediately thereafter.
In the western U.S., arid...
I think they should be investigated themselves. Why wasn't the police department and officials checking all elderly homes? I mean, even people, old people in their houses. This is ridiculous. This is manslaughter at the very least. The government should know where everybody who's old or disabled or infirmed lives, and in a situation where the electricity goes off, they should be going, especially in a place like Florida where it's so hot, should be going and checking on them. I mean, this is a responsibility, just like healthcare is a right. Protection from awful things. I mean, these people died a horrible death, right? This is America? Sounds like, well, even third world countries, you know, the people check up on each other and look out for each other. This is beyond, I mean, I don't know what to say.
There were over 60,000 in total sent and received. About half were work-related and went to the State Department, and about half were personal, that were not in any way related to my work.
When you speak to the public, you say, I turned over everything. That's, for the most part, a direct quote. When you talk to the public, you say, I turned over everything.
90 to 95% of my work-related emails were in the state system. If they wanted to see them, they would certainly have been able to.
You know what?
So.
That is maybe the 10th time you have cited that figure today.
It is.
And I have not heard anyone other than you ever cite that figure. Who told you that 90 to 95% of your emails were in the State Department system? Who told you that?
We learned that from the State Department in their analysis of the emails that were already on the system.
The Inspector General report found that less than 1% of State Department emails, record emails, were captured. So they give a number of less than 1%, and you give a number of 90%.
Continue to fuel massive wildfires. The National Interagency Fire Center reports at least 62 large fires burning this week in California, Montana, Oregon, and 6 other western states. At least 8 million acres of forest and grassland have been burned so far this year. Increasing climate chaos has driven a number of celebrities to warn of the dangers of global warming.
Now, as far as whether that's caused by global warming, I don't know. I mean, really, there's been fires in California and other parts of the United States for as long as I can remember. My grandfather was a firefighter in Corning, California, and they'd have massive brush fires, but there wasn't really anything to burn, like no houses or anything back then. Not through there, and the towns were safe. The brush fires could go right around a town, you know. I mean, they would just protect the town. Anyway, I agree, you know, absolutely about climate change. I don't think there's any doubt in that one scientific data graph that shows carbon dioxide and temperature going up and down together. I mean, I think that's pretty solid evidence, right? As to the whether it's human or not, well, the carbon dioxide is going up is being caused by humans. Okay, so I don't think there's any doubt there. As to climate change, what's going to happen? Well, we know what's going to happen if all that water melts at the poles, or at least in theory. Well, let's hope they're wrong, right? Because it is going to melt if things continue on the way they're going. So New York City, all these places. Well, I don't live there. No, I feel sorry for the people, because the people are the ones who will suffer the most. But to be quite honest, I think I agree with Osama bin Laden. Well, maybe not in killing people, but if New York were underwater, I think we'd all be better off, along with a number of other skyscrapers, you know, because they work and operate the establishment out of those skyscrapers all over the United States, all over the world. The establishment is really an international thing. I mean, the reason that people don't come together like rich people do is we don't have the money or the time. You know, we spend our time doing the work of to keep the country afloat. They spend their time getting together and colluding to protect their wealth. I mean, that's all that is really going on. And then they have lackeys do the grunt work that keeps the economy going and keeps all the rest of us, the ones who working. Anyway, I'm a little off the subject. The point is if global warming were to cause the elite to have to camp out for a while before they built some new high-rises, some new skyscrapers to work out of, then not a tear would be shed. Okay, so as to these fires, I don't know. I mean, would they be more? Maybe they'd be less with climate change, or maybe they'd move around. Maybe they'd move farther north, and who knows? But it seems to me like the obvious conclusion is that well, I don't know. I mean, I would refer you to the many shows that I've watched, documentaries on climate change and possible effects. Overall, I don't think that, I mean, until it gets, well, I'll tell you where, like India last year, that showed us. That's kind of, you know, and that's Indians. So Americans aren't like overly concerned about the fact that it hit like 120 for like 2 weeks or something. I remember it being just unbearably hot there and killing like hundreds of people, or at least a couple hundred people. So that's the kind of climate change I'm worried about. I'm worried about the poor people Just a note, right? We the people do have a problem. We're overpopulating the earth. I mean, rich people, I'm sure, try to populate as much as they can. The Kennedys with 12 kids and, you know, out of one woman. I mean, what are we? Puppies? But we know that this country would be a lot better off, and that it was better off when we had 150. When I was a kid, we only had 150 million. We've doubled our population in 40 years, 35, 40 years. It's really not good for the economy or the country. We really need to set up a system that is based on a certain population, and we need to have like scientists who are proud of their work studying to say, well, how many people, what kind of crops, what kind of manufacturing, production. See what I'm saying? And how will climate change affect that? How will it affect crops and stuff? And then there's trade, right? Because that's the other leg, right, of production, well, overseas. So Republicans, conservatives, establishment Democrats don't do that. They leave that to the private sector. Well, the private sector doesn't really care about the people. All it cares about is its people. I mean, this is all about cliques. This is all about subsets. This is all about groups within groups who take care of themselves, even though they're hurting the bigger groups even more, the rest of the people. So, as for climate change, I understand you guys are trying to fight it, and I think you go a little overboard trying to say that, oh, hurricanes or forest fires or drought are really the product of climate change. I mean, I think we should leave it up to, and the scientists don't all agree on this yet. There just hasn't been enough study because we don't have the money to study it. We can't get our government to study it, and especially under Donald Trump, especially under him or any other Republican, we're not going to get any help in this area. So we're kind of on our own right now, but when we get progressive candidates in there, that's going to be one of the priorities, is to study the economy and things like climate change and the relationships between all these different things, not just climate change, but everything, how it relates and how it works within the economy, and how best to manage our little community called the United States of America.
Represented Wall Street as a senator from New York, and I went to Wall Street in December of 2007, before the big crash that we had, and I basically said, cut it out. Quit foreclosing on homes. Quit engaging in these kinds of speculative behaviors.
Now, who's exactly to blame for the housing crisis? I think there's plenty of blame to go around. Home buyers who paid extra fees to avoid documenting their income should have known they were getting in over their heads.
Of course, we have to deal with the problem that the banks are still too big to fail. We can never let the American taxpayer and middle-class families ever have to bail out the kind of speculative behavior that we saw. But we also have to worry about some of the other players. AIG, a big insurance company, Lehman Brothers, an investment bank. There's this whole area called shadow banking. That's where the experts tell me the next potential problem could come from. So I'm with both Senator Sanders and Governor O'Malley in putting a lot of attention. represented New York, and I represented New York on 9/11. When we were attacked, where were we attacked? We were attacked in downtown Manhattan, where Wall Street is. I did spend a whole lot of time and effort helping them rebuild. That was good for New York, it was good for the economy, and it was a way to rebuke the terrorists who had attacked our country.
9/11 was bad.